Ed, over the... That's all right, just around there, that's fine. And now, will you tell Jason to sit, or will I? Very good, that's a good fellow. How old is he?
7.
7, he's a good lad, is he?
He is, that's one worrying thing over. There's one problem with when you're working dogs, you never quite know what they'll do. I remember I occasionally did talks in primary schools, and I once actually said to a dog, my old dog, I said to one of the kids, call the dog and she'll come over to you and then I'll whistle back with a silent whistle. And the child called the dog ran over and straight out the door and relieved itself. So we were over that one.
Jason, you can't see because he's sitting down here right under the desk and his head out between our 2 legs. Very, very good indeed. Now, first of all, how come you're blind, Ed? How did it happen?
Well, I lost the sight of one eye with, at least it's thought to be measles when I was about 11 months old. Definitely an infection, they're not very sure what. And then the second eye, I stuck a pair of scissors in when I was about 3½. Which has the advantage that it's entirely my fault, so I can't blame anybody else. But other than that, there's no great virtue in it.
Just playing with the scissors, were you?
I gather I was trying to cut a piece of leather, and the big lesson it taught me, which I hope I've learned for the sake of my own children, is that you know, always teach people to use tools or don't leave them around.
Yeah. The guide dog, Jason, seems very, very good indeed. A complication? Are people frightened of him? He's a fairly big Alsatian, you know?
Yes, the world is divided into 2 unequal sections, those that love Alsatians and those that hate them. And those that hate them, I'm afraid, is the majority. The thing is, they have a very bad reputation, justifiably. If a poodle gets out of hand, it'll give you a nasty nip on the ankle, and if he does, you won't have a foot.
That's right.
And that's the difference.
Yeah. But of course, a guide dog would never behave in that fashion, of course. But what sort of things do people say about the dog and about you and the dog and so on?
Well, you get all sorts of reactions. I'll give you an example. That I went to a theatre in London, and frequently when you arrive with a dog, people's first reaction is, no, not letting the dog in, no way. And this particular theatre, this happened, and they said no, and I usually story, I said, well, can I see the manager? Yes, all right then, and the manager said, well, we would let you in, but he's a fire hazard. I said, but he doesn't smoke. No, but he's a fire hazard. Well, in the end, we came to the compromise, and it was one of the nicest compromises I ever came to. I had one of the cheapest seats in the theatre, and I'd actually gone with a group of other people, and none of us could afford it, really. And he said, well, the only thing to do is you better have a box because it's got easy access, and we all got a box.
Because of Jason.
Because of Jason.
Now, why Cape Cleire, Ed? What has you down there?
To be honest, a whole series of coincidences. Why it was Cape Cleire rather than anywhere else in Ireland. As you said in the introduction, I originally came to Ireland. You have me confused now because we've just been talking about a tourism drive we have over there, and we came up with the idea that Ireland is really only an island off Cape Cleire. And this is the big mistake everybody else has made, and that's why I made the confusion there. I'm sorry about that. But I came over to Ireland because of the music, and I finished up on Cape Cleire really because we went on holiday along that coast, we being myself and my wife Winifred. I can't remember if we were married or not at the time, probably not. And we simply saw an advert for a day trip to Cape Cleire. We went over to Cape Cleire, and we intended to carry on along the coast. And in fact, one way or another, we never did. And that would be 1973. And we came back then every summer and every Easter after that until 79 when we bought a house there. And eventually moved over full-time, 76, and we bought the house in 79. Moved over full-time then, so that's almost 9 years now.
Can you see anything, Ed?
Not at all.
Not even light?
Not even light.
Not even light. Absolute darkness. Well, I want to show them the video that was made by a friend of yours of you in action, because this, more than anything, Ed, more than any words, will give you an idea of what Ed is up to and how he goes about it and so on. And I'll read you a little bit of descriptive stuff over it. Now, this is an amateur video, and the quality is not great because it's been used quite a lot. But you can roll it there, Roisin, please, and I'll give you an idea of how Ed goes about his regular daily business handling the goats. Here he is on his Cape Cleire, treading the well-worn paths on his way to check that fencing is secure and gates are closed, and that everything generally is pretty well with his goats. It's a lovely sylvan setting. Now, the important thing to remember, though, is that the land is bordered by steep cliffs, and on rare occasions he's had to enlist the assistance of a friend to lower himself over the steep cliffs and bring stray goats back. It's not a nice thought. He has a herd of 31 goats, 28 milkers, 3 males, and twice daily the goats are brought to the sheds where they're milked by machine. As you can see, Ed does everything himself, attaches the milking machine, checking everything is clean, working, untangled, so the goats can be milked. Ed works slowly, but very methodically, and with great care for his animals. And when a goat has just had a baby, or if for any reason the teat is tender, he will milk by hand. And of course, he's an expert at that. Now, when the milking is done, it's brought to the house where it's carefully strained, and then it's poured into square plastic containers, and they fit neatly into a fridge, where the milk will, of course, cool. Now, the kids, of course, the babies, have to be fed. Each goat usually has 2 kids, and so Ed is expecting over 50 kids to be added to his herd over the next few weeks. And he's devised this feeding system himself, and they seem very pleased with it anyway. It's every man for himself and belt the fellow beside you. In order to establish how much milk to put in each container, Ed has to weigh the milk, which he does, of course, again with great care. It's a specially adapted weighing scales, which simply sits down when the correct weight is reached. And when he has weighed out the right amount, he pours it into cartons, and all the cartons are placed in units in the freezer, and then Ed is able to establish the freezer is properly regulated because he uses a talking thermometer. A talking thermometer. And now and then, of course, one of the kids will get fussy and objects to the normal feeding system, but in those circumstances, who better than Ed Harper to be mother? Get it down, you're one way or the other. Absolutely fascinating. It's terribly, terribly difficult not to be patronizing and condescending in a case and saying, my goodness, aren't you a great fella to be able to do all of those things. But how do you know if the goats are real or lame when you can't see?
Really, because you handle them. If you know your animal very well, and that's true for anybody, whether you're blind or you're fully sighted, that if you know your animal well when it's under normal circumstances, when it's fit, then you notice a change as soon as it's not. If you don't know your animals well, whatever kind of farmer you are, you haven't got a chance. You know, you'll lose animals. But there are...
How do you know if one is missing, Ed? How would you know if one of the goats is missing?
Well, that's a very good one. I mean, basically, they go into pens every night. They sleep in pens at night. And so you check them into the pen at night. And you should pick them up then. And then when they come up to be fed or milked, you'd pick them up then if anybody's missing. But in fact, I had the experience only 2 weeks ago there, that I had the rest of the family out searching all over the place because I couldn't find these 2 missing goats. And I discovered them the next day. They'd gone into a very small pen that's about 4 foot by 4 foot with one of the males. And I hate to think the kind of night they had with them.
Ed, what is your mental picture of Cape Cleare? Has it been described for you?
It has. But actually, well, for one thing, I have actually handled a map of Cape Cleare, a raised map. And we actually make T-shirts and things with maps on, which you can actually feel the printing on. So I know the shape. The physical shape of the island, okay? But in actual fact, when you're in a place for any length of time, you get to know it by sound, by smell, by a mental picture that you build up. You know, you walk around a place, you work out a kind of mental map, if you like, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to get from A to B, because you wouldn't know where A and B were relative to each other. So, and I think one of the most attractive things about Cape Cleare is that, and one of the reasons I think it would be hard to leave, is the sea. You can always hear the sea, anywhere on Cape.
Would you know every bump and hump on those little paths that you traverse every day?
I suppose I do, in the sense that I can recognise where I am. It doesn't seem like that. I couldn't kind of recite them to you, if you know what I mean. But if you were to drop me out of parachute and give me kind of a couple of minutes to walk along, I'll tell you roughly where I was. You know?
What about when the goats are kidding? How do you manage with that?
Well, actually, funny enough, when goats are kidding, there's no disadvantage, really, in being blind, or only very limited disadvantages, because normal kiddings, really, you don't need to do anything at all. The goats will kid, there's no problems. When it's kidded, you let the goat lick the kid, and then you take the kid away, or whatever you're going to do with the kid. If it's a bad kidding, and you have to assist the goat, it's all by touch anyway. Now, the only disadvantage is you have to know when she's having problems. And I can usually tell that just by the way the goat's behaving. You can hear the goat in the pen while it's moving. If I'm in any doubt, the goats know me very, very well. I can go into a goat that's actually giving birth and handle her, and she doesn't mind. It doesn't put her off at all.
Do you know all your goats by name, Ed?
Yes, yeah, yes. They all have names.
All 28?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know Zara in Galway? Zara
yes,
Brady?
I do.
You do? Because she has a herd of goats as well. She's in the same business. And she knows them all by name. And they come in milking every day. And she says, now Freddie, now Joe, you're next time. And they just ramble in and they come in by name.
Does Jason ever have a crisis of identity and wonder, is he a goat?
No. He knows he's a dog because he's afraid of the goats. I have one goat in particular, is a huge white goat called Sheba. And she was brought up with Yorkshire Terriers. And she learnt very young that the dogs were things to be terrorised. And she hasn't realised that, you know, Jason's a bit bigger than the Yorkshire Terrier. And if she can, she gives him a nip. He's absolutely terrified of it.
Everything is so much more difficult on an island, though, Ed, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, the practical difficulties that you're up against, and it's not just for me, I mean, it's for everybody that lives on Cape. I mean, everything, you know, from a loaf of bread to a building block to an animal, whatever, has to come in on the boat. And that means anything that normally you could have delivered to your farm, I mean, if it's a ton of gravel, you know, you'd have it delivered to the farm. Well, what happens with a ton of gravel, say, it's delivered to Baltimore, then it has to be got onto the boat, then it has to be got off the boat the other end, then it has to be handled into a trailer, then it has to be driven up to the farm, and then it's delivered. And that makes life difficult and expensive. And now, I mean, what's making life even more difficult is that our pier is in a very sorry state of disrepair at the moment. And our boat, which normally can run at almost any time of the day or night, there are about 6 hours of the day when it couldn't run even in dire emergency now. And the way things are, we know the work that needs doing. There are estimates actually being compiled at the moment for that work. One estimate's already gone in. And we haven't got a decision that there's going to be any money at all for it. And if our pier falls into the sea and blocks the harbour, well, basically we'll be swimming.
You've done, exactly, yeah. Mind you, you have the great advantage, Ed, that you can work at night.